Good afternoon and welcome to this meeting of the Council for the Municipality of Dutton Dunwich. It is January 24, 2024. It's 5 p.m. Clerk Tara, if you would get us started, please.
Moved by Loveland, seconded by Pemberton, that the meeting of the Council of the Municipality of Dutton Dunwich opens at 5 o'clock p.m. All in favor? And that's carried.
Thank you. Does anyone have a declaration of pecuniary interest?
I do, Mayor Hans. I've previously declared a conflict on the item 9.2 consent correspondence from Thames Valley District School Board. They are my employer, and I have the paperwork to submit.
Okay, thank you.
Just one question. Can we just pull that out of the consent and do it separately, or out of the consent correspondence approval?
I think so.
Okay, thanks.
Nothing further from council? Everyone has received the draft minutes from the previous meeting. Are there any errors, omissions, changes requested? I see none. Then the minutes are adopted as presented to council. Clerk Tara, are there any items not listed on the agenda?
There are none.
Okay. Okay, to number 5 on our agenda, I would like to introduce John Mascarin. John, I see you there now.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of council.
Okay, I'm going to do a bit of an introduction here, John, and thank you for providing that.
Right.
John is our Integrity Commissioner. He is a partner with Aird and Bearless LLP in Toronto. He leads all of his firm's municipal accountability appointments and mandates, including as Integrity Commissioner for the municipality. He is a certified specialist by the Law Society of Ontario in municipal law, local government, and land use planning and development. He's an adjunct professor at Osgoode Law School in both the JD and LLM programs. He's also an author of 6 published books in the municipal and planning law areas. He is the 2022 recipient of the Bruce A. Noble Distinguished Canadian Municipal Lawyer Award by the International Municipal Lawyers Association. So with that introduction, John, and you've met, I believe you've met our council before.
I have, yes.
Okay, or we could do introductions here as well if you would like that.
Mr. Mayor, I had spoken to your council before. I think you were kind enough to introduce, or everyone introduce themselves, and I think I'm ready to go if that's all right with you.
Okay, over to you, John.
Okay, terrific. Well, good evening, Mr. Mayor and members of council. Thank you very much for having me this evening. I have a presentation for you. I often refer to it as my governance presentation. I've called it Roles and Responsibilities. It's something that I think is clearly within the wheelhouse of an integrity commissioner who must understand what the roles and responsibilities are of council as the elected body that's the decision-making authority for the municipality, the individual council members who populate the council, and how they work together with the administration, what the administration's function is. So I think it's clearly something that, well, it's certainly something that I speak about quite often. I'm a general municipal law lawyer, and I do general municipal law, but I often speak about it in terms of municipal law, but also in my accountability responsibilities as integrity commissioner. So, Mr. Mayor, I have the presentation is about, I don't know, I would say close to an hour or so, but I would welcome questions whenever you would like them. You know, you can ask me the questions throughout if that's easier for you, or if you'd like to manage time, perhaps you can reserve your questions and ask them at the end. I'm in your hands, Mr. Mayor, whatever works best for you and your council.
Okay, council, any preference? We've got a pretty good agenda, so I think we'll try and reserve the questions until the end, if that works for you.
It certainly does, Mr. Mayor. So please, no one forget them. Jot them down, and I'd be happy to answer them. So I'm going to share my screen now, Mr. Mayor, and I hope I'm going to call up the right slide deck. And please let me know if it's up. It looks like it is on my end.
We can see it.
Terrific. Okay, so I'll just start off with a very brief introduction. There's two quotes from two sources, and then I'll go into the actual presentation, show you the outline of what I'll be speaking to you about. So the first one is a very famous case, actually a case that I've had to refer to very recently about council's authority to do certain things without fettering council's discretion. But it's from the Pacific National Investments case from the city of Victoria that went all the way to the Supreme Court of Canada some 24 years ago. It's hard for me to believe it's already 24 years ago. And the quote is from Justice LaBelle very early on in the decision, which she said, municipal governments are democratic institutions through which people of a community embark upon and structure life together. I've always loved that quotation there. That it's very inspirational. I find I used to actually end it after municipal governments are democratic institutions when I used to teach at my law school class, and then I realized I was missing the key part of what Justice LaBelle was trying to say, which is through which the municipal government, the council, embarks upon with its community to structure a life with your residents, which I find, again, a very inspirational sentiment by the Supreme Court of Canada. The second one is from Ian Rogers, who was a known authority in municipal law, and he had written this really wonderful book, encyclopedic work back in 1959, and it was revised and restructured for the second edition in 1972, which is now over 50 years old, but it's carried on. Mr. Rogers says, while serving on the council, members are under a duty to act in the best interests of the corporation and the citizens they represent. Now, you may look at that and say, the corporation and the citizens, why is that? Well, Section 4 of the Municipal Act says the inhabitants of a municipality are incorporated within their geographical region as a municipal corporation. So that's where you get the corporation and the citizens. So the citizens of the municipality are incorporated as the municipal corporation. In your case, the corporation of the township of Dutton Dunwich. You are a corporation, a municipal corporation, which is very different from a business corporation, and you're incorporated by statute. You are a municipality within Elgin County and a local municipality within Elgin County. So here's my outline of the presentation for you today. I'm going to talk about the roles and responsibilities. I've already given it away a little bit in my introduction. I'll talk about council as the assembly, the elected assembly, what council's responsibilities are. I'm going to pivot a little bit, talk about the head of council, about you, Mr. Mayor, and what your responsibilities and obligations are. I'll talk about the individual role of a council member. I'll then move and talk about the municipal administration, and then I'll try to wrap it together to talk about the council and staff relationship, because the administrative arm has to work with the executive arm, and you'll see I'll talk a little bit about that. And then finally, something that has probably struck me more than ever before in my 34-year career as a municipal lawyer is, what does a council member do when a council member has dual or multiple responsibilities because of their role as a member of council, but also perhaps a member of another body? And how do you reconcile those? So I thought that that would be important to discuss. So we've got a little bit of a step up there as we go through these, and hopefully it will all come together at the end. So I'll start off with the roles and responsibilities of council. As you know, there's a purpose section that was put into the Municipal Act. The reason it was put in, you won't see purpose sections very often. You will see them with new pieces of legislation. Now, the Municipal Act isn't a new piece of legislation, but the 2001 Municipal Act was a marked departure from the earlier 150 years form of municipal act that had been put in place since pre-Confederation by the Baldwin Act, the Consolidated Municipal Act of 1849 in Upper Canada. The purposes of the act is set out right at Section 2. It says municipalities are created by the province of Ontario. You'll often hear the derogatory reference to municipalities are creatures of provincial statute. Well, if you didn't know that, Section 2 of the Municipal Act sets it out. Municipalities are created by the province of Ontario. Why? To be responsible and accountable governments with respect to matters within their jurisdiction. So immediately there's an inherent confinement of the jurisdiction of a municipality. As you know, municipalities are creatures of provincial statute. You are not an independent, constitutionally protected level of government. You are put under the purview and under the dominion of the province by Section 92(8) of the Constitution Act 1867, which said municipal institutions are creations of the province and are put under the jurisdiction of the province. So you are responsible and accountable governments, but only with respect to matters within your jurisdiction. And then it goes on to say, and each municipality is given powers and duties under this act, the Municipal Act, the Omnibus Act, as well as many other acts. I think the last time I looked at this, there was about 160 separate statutes in Ontario that gave municipalities powers, authorities, or responsibilities and obligations. And for what? For the purpose of providing good government with respect to those matters. As you know, the municipality, not being a constitutionally protected level of government, is subject to the ultra vires rule. That means you're subject to a challenge against anything that you do on the basis of ultra vires. Ultra vires meaning not within your jurisdiction. So you'll often see that challenges to your authority are brought by members of the public, by businesses, by residents, by public interest groups, by many other persons, perhaps by the provincial government or the federal government, as to what you may do as a council through a bylaw, resolution, or otherwise. So you are the most important decision-making body at the local level. You exercise executive and legislative powers. Mostly that's what you do. The executive powers, you set policies, you set programs. Legislation, you're entitled to pass bylaws, to enact resolutions, to give approvals, to provide orders, and give direction. Those are legislative functions that are set out in statutes. The Municipal Act, the Planning Act, Development Charges Act, Ontario Heritage Act, and so on. You also, in certain instances, have quasi-judicial powers. I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about it. Quasi-judicial powers is when you can act as a tribunal. And as you know, sometimes council does act as a tribunal, perhaps as a licensing authority, certainly as an adjudicator for a development charge complaint, sometimes for hardship under tax bylaw where you can grant relief. You sometimes act as an adjudicator. It's very rare. Well, it's not rare, but it's very small, a percentage of what you do. And in that case, you have a very different role to play, and a different standard applies to how you make decisions. That's actually a topic for a complete other day because it's very complicated. So, council, distilled, is an elected assembly, and it acts as a collective body. And how does it act? Well, typically by a majority vote. to do things. It's very rare that you have to have a supermajority vote. There used to be in statute a number of statutes. I think there's still one through the Drainage Act where you might have to have a supermajority vote. That's a 2/3 vote. But unless it's in your procedure bylaw, I doubt that there's another statute out there that says that you have to give a supermajority, a 2/3 or a 3/4 vote, or a unanimous vote, I guess, potentially, to enact and do certain things. But where you'll typically find them is in a vote under the procedure bylaw for certain matters. But typically it's a plain majority vote. Now, interestingly enough, you probably heard about strong mayor powers, and I will talk about them very briefly. There is an ability to pass a vote with less than a majority of council, and that's incredibly unusual. And to me, it's a derogation from 180 years of local governance here in Ontario. But there is the ability to do so for municipalities that have been designated as strong mayor municipalities. And typically, the approvals, the resolutions, the bylaws that council enacts and gives are done through open public meetings for purposes of accountability, transparency, and openness. That's not the case. You may be able to make some decisions in a closed meeting, so there is that ability to do so. I'm not going to spend any time on this. I'm showing you the role of council as it's set out in the Municipal Act. It's actually set out in Section 224. You'll see them. You probably were shown this during orientation. This isn't the most important case, the University Village Guelph Limited case versus the City of Guelph. But I like what it says here, and it distills down very clearly in just 2 sentences something that's very important. It says, the first part, in Ontario, the decision-making power of municipalities is given to the municipal council, and it is to exercise those powers by bylaw. Now, that phrasing isn't exactly correct, and I'll show you why in just a moment, but it's the general rule that municipality has to act by bylaw. But this is the second part that I find interesting, the second sentence there. The council is the general agent of the corporation. So again, putting it in squarely, you are a municipal corporation, and for all purposes, and it is the means whereby the municipality may bind itself to a course of action. So what this is basically saying is only council can decide to do things and bind the municipality. There is a rule of law that applies in general to business corporations. It's called the Indoor Management Rule, and it's been enshrined in both the Ontario Business Corporations Act as well as the Canadian Business Corporations Act. And the rule, the Indoor Management Rule, says if you hold yourself out as having authority to do something and you're a senior officer or director of a corporation, you may, in fact, bind your corporation by the acts that you take and by the words that you utter. Okay, that rule has been disavowed with respect to municipalities. There are a number of cases, including a Supreme Court of Canada case, that says unequivocally the Indoor Management Rule that applies to business corporations does not apply to a municipal corporation. Only council can bind the municipality to a course of action, and it can do so specifically or generally, and I'll explain that in a moment. Now, where does this come from? Well, it comes from the Municipal Act. You'll see that Section 5 of the Municipal Act, Section 5 sub 1, says the powers of a municipality shall be exercised by its council. And then how is it to do so? Well, just going back, I'm going to slide back. It says here in this case is the municipal council is to exercise those powers by bylaw. That's not exactly what Section 5.3 says. It says a municipal power shall be exercised by bylaw unless the municipality is specifically authorized to do otherwise. And there are a number of instances in the Municipal Act where it says council can pass a resolution to do something. That's indicating otherwise. So it's specifically otherwise indicated. The one that throws people for a loop often is when council goes in camera in a closed setting under section 293 for one of the 14 purposes that are listed there. Council is entitled to have a vote, which it otherwise is not allowed to do except in very circumscribed instances in a closed meeting. It can have a vote to give directions to staff and consultants. Many people misunderstand that that is like the force of a bylaw. And why is that? Because it's council is specifically authorized to do that and give direction to staff to do whatever council considers appropriate. Settle a litigation matter, purchase or dispose of lands, deal with employment or labor relations matters. And there's a whole bunch of other things that are set out. Council can do that provided it follows the requirements to go into a closed meeting by passing a resolution indicating why, and it goes into a closed meeting for a proper purpose, one of those 14 exceptions that you can meet in a closed session. Then council is entitled to give direction. So you don't actually need a bylaw to enshrine that authority. And a number of people have missed this, including a number of closed meetings investigators. So for your knowledge, if you give direction to staff in a closed meeting, it is like you've passed a bylaw. You haven't passed a bylaw, but it's like you have because you are authorized to do that. It's as otherwise specifically authorized. Okay? So in Ontario, and in fact throughout all of Canada, the traditional system of governance for councils has been through the weak mayor system. The weak mayor system is actually this. The head of council is the ostensible leader of the executive branch of local government, of the municipality. However, no member of council, including the mayor, has, quote, inherent executive powers, and the mayor can only act in concert with a quorum of council to implement the decisions and actions on behalf of the municipality. So, council is the decision-making body. The head of council, even though the head of council is the leader and acts in a leadership role, the head of council typically only has a single vote on council and must act together with the rest of council in order to achieve what the head of council would like to do and what council needs to do. This was made clear in the Collingwood Judicial Inquiry, and I quote from Justice Morocco's report, Transparency in the Public Trust. The council as a whole is the directing mind of the municipality, not the individual members. Council is responsible for setting policies and priorities, allocating resources, providing direction to staff on the material, operational, and financial business of the municipality. Council members must not seek to wield that power unilaterally or away from the council chamber. Okay? So I'm going to move now. That was council. Again, council's the decision-making body for the municipality. Now I'm going to talk about the head of council. The role of the head of council is set out in section 225 of the Municipal Act. You'll see that most of the things that you see there are commonsensical and what you would expect. The head of council presides over council meetings, must carry out the business of council efficiently and effectively. The Mann versus Saugeen Shores, a very important decision that was made earlier last year, about this time last year, February of this year. Very interesting decision that talks about efficient and effective council meetings. The mayor provides leadership to council. provides information and recommendations to council with respect to the role of council, represents the municipality in official functions, and carries out the duties of the head of council as are set out in the Municipal Act and a number of other statutes. The one that is confusing, though, is the very first bullet there, sub-bullet, acts as the chief executive officer of the municipality. Now, most people would probably say, I know what a CEO does, but what they're thinking of course, is a CEO in a business corporation. So the Municipal Act tried to remedy this, but didn't do a very good job. So if you look at what the head of council as the chief executive officer actually does, it doesn't look at all like what a CEO of a business corporation does. And this was addressed in the Collingwood Judicial Inquiry, because one of the problems in Collingwood was that the mayor was acting very much like the CEO of a business corporation. What I say goes, and you have to do it, staff, and you, CAO of the corporation, have to do my bidding. That's not the law for the predominant number of municipalities in the province, okay? And Justice Morocco covers this in volume 1 of his report. The roles and responsibilities of the head of council differ from those of a corporate CEO in a meaningful way. The head of council does not have the same powers as a corporate CEO. The head of council does not have the power to commit the municipality to anything unilaterally. Okay, that's a very important statement there, and it's followed by number of cases, except now that here in Ontario, the province has deemed it appropriate to have strong mayors, where special executive powers for the mayors in 45 municipalities. There have been 45 municipalities that have been designated under Section 284.2 of the Municipal Act as strong mayor powers. Okay, actually, that's not absolutely correct. I'm sorry. I'm just slightly off on that. The 44 municipalities, the City of Toronto has its own authority, so it doesn't have to actually be designated as a strong mayor municipality. It is under the City of Toronto Act. The mayors of these strong mayor municipalities have the powers to hire and fire the CAO, to give directions to staff with respect to the powers that they have under this new section of the Municipal Act, which includes the development and the creation of the organizational structure of the municipality, including changes to the organizational structure. The creation of the municipal budget is the responsibility of the mayor. And in certain instances, the mayor is entitled to veto a bylaw that's been enacted by council if the mayor is of the opinion that it potentially interferes with provincial priorities that are set out in a regulation 580/22 by the province. And what does prescribed priorities mean? Provincial priorities. They are the development of housing, 1.5 new dwelling units, new housing units by 2030, and anything that deals with infrastructure to support housing units. And through a subsequent act, the Better Municipal Governance Act, this is the one that instills the power for a minority of council to pass a bylaw if the mayor is of the opinion that it potentially advances provincial priorities. The wording of the Better Municipal Governance Act says that if more than 1/3 of the council passes a bylaw and the mayor is entitled to vote for that bylaw, then it's the mayor plus 1/3 of council can pass a bylaw. Extraordinary. Getting rid of majority rule in the province of Ontario. 45 municipalities have been granted this authority, not your municipality. So I just wanted to give you a little bit of a flavor about it. I think it's a terrible piece of legislation that, as I said, erodes the system of local governance in Ontario that's been in place for about 180 years. So that's the mayor, the head of council. I'm now going to talk about the role of the individual members of council. It's very interesting. Even though a number of actors in the municipal realm have articulated roles set out in the Municipal Act or other statutes, council, the head of council, the municipal administration, and statutory officers, and I'm going to get to that in a moment, there is no specific statutory provision anywhere in the statute that actually identifies the precise authorities, obligations, and responsibilities of an individual member of council, okay? Justice Cunningham recommended that the Municipal Act be amended to actually define what the roles and responsibilities are of an individual member of council. And he said it should be made clear that only council as a whole and not a single individual council member has the authority to direct staff to carry out a particular function or to act on any matter unless council has specifically authorized them to do so. And council can do that. There are very broad delegation powers that are set out in the Municipal Act. I believe they're in sections 23.1 to 23.6 of the Municipal Act, where council can delegate to a person or a body or an official certain responsibilities. Otherwise, council members do not have any inherent authority and jurisdiction on their own. I like this from the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing. Every 4 years, it updates the Ontario Municipal Councillor's Guide. So I'd like to quote this for you and just explain it a little bit. It says there, under the role of the councillor, as a councillor, you have three main roles to play in your municipality. You are a representative, you are a policymaker, and you're a steward. Now, I probably wouldn't have used the word steward. That's not how I would think. I probably would have used the word trustee, which is the predominant term that's used in the body of jurisprudence that's been created. However, steward will work. A steward is someone who looks after something and has stewardship, has responsibilities over finances or over something. The quote goes on and says these roles overlap. Yes, you will be called upon to make and consider decisions on issues that will be complex and controversial. Here's the key point that I wanted to make here. Many of those decisions will have long-term consequences for your municipality that extend beyond the 4-year term of your office and should be made in the context of your municipality's plans for the long-term health and welfare of your community. I would urge you to really take those words to heart. I understand, and your staff understands, and sometimes the public understands all too well, that you as members of council are elected on a 4-year term. And so sometimes there is this thing that council members may look towards a 4-year horizon in which to make their decisions. I would submit to you that that is the wrong thing to do. You are always to consider the best interests of the municipality and its residents in terms of your long-term vision, in terms of the long-term health, welfare, and well-being of your citizens. I appreciate that there may be short-term solutions and short-term things that you will have to deal with, but you should always not look to the next election term in which to confide where you're going to be made. And this is where, and I'm going to be getting to this in just a moment, where there may be a little bit of tension between staff and council. Staff are not typically there on a set term. Some staff members may be. They may be on contract for a set term. Typically not, though. Most staff members are there and they hope to be there for the long run. They will always be looking out for things in the long term. So sometimes they appreciate, and you must appreciate that there may be a bit of tension there because you may be wanting to do something in the short term and staff may be saying to you, I'm not sure I can give you an unequivocal yes. I agree with you. Why? Because staff is there looking at the long-term consequences, not really worried about having the council reelected for the next term. You have to understand that it's a reality, as staff understand that it's a reality for you to sometimes consider your reelection prospects and keeping perhaps a certain segment of the population, of the residents, of the citizenry, of the electors, the ratepayers happy. Okay, but that's not how you should typically make your decisions. They have to be made in the best interest of the municipality with consideration of budget, staffing, social, and yes, political. But political doesn't trump all, okay? George Rusty, a very well-known lawyer in Ontario, has just recently given back his license. Was a lawyer, I think, for 50 years, wrote a lot about municipal matters. I really like this. I have the handbook, not here in my home office, but at my office. Members of council have no authority as individuals to take action on behalf of the municipal corporations, except in conjunction with other members constituting a quorum of the council, unless they've been specifically authorized to do otherwise, right, by a bylaw of the municipality or by statute. Ian Rogers says it slightly differently. Members of council are merely legislative officers of the corporation. And with the exception of the head or chief executive officers, they have no individual executive or ministerial duties. They have no authority to act for the corporation, again, except in conjunction with other members, constituting a quorum at a meeting where they can make decisions as majority council. Remember, you owe a fiduciary duty to the electorate, to the corporation, going back to L'Abbé versus Blind River 120 years ago, a case that was cited in the Mississauga Judicial Inquiry of Justice Cunningham back in 2012. A member of council stands as a trustee for the local community. That's a very high threshold. A trustee looks after something or someone as if that something was their own or the someone was themselves. That is the high standard. Sims and Fertizzi, a case some 90 years later, said it again, an elected official stands in a fiduciary relationship with the electorate, okay? One thing that you do not act as, you are not an employee of the municipality. There's a very well-known case that says a long-standing principle of municipal law, an elected official is not an agent or employee of the municipal corporation. Elected members of council are not employed by or under the control of the local authority. Interestingly enough, this just came to the courts just a slight time ago, just a few months ago, the Raz versus Mississauga versus Ron Starr. This is the case, it made a lot of headlines. This is the case where a council member was alleged to have keyed the car of a fellow member of council while in the parking lot and have intimidated, bullied, and harassed the member to such a degree that she felt that she had to resign from office. So interestingly enough, though, Karen Raz bought a lawsuit against the city of Mississauga and Ron Starr, arguing that she was an employee. And the court just recently said this: the plaintiff was a city councillor. An elected city councillor has a unique role. It is a principle of municipal law that city councillors are not employees of a municipal corporation. This is why you cannot, as members of council, take the benefit of the Occupational Health and Safety Act. As you know, under the Occupational Health and Safety Act, an employer, a municipality, has a duty to protect its employees. it doesn't have a duty to protect its council members, interesting enough, because they are not employees. And in fact, there are cases that have said they are not in an employment relationship, they are not to a contractual relationship with the municipalities, and therefore a municipality does not have to protect its council members in the same way that it might have to protect its workers or employees. Okay. Now, moving away from the elected side and moving to the municipal administration, that, like many other actors, is set out. It's specified in the Municipal Act, Section 227. The role of officers and employees of the municipality are, and look at this, to implement council's decisions and to carry out council's decisions, to undertake research and provide advice to council, and finally, under 3, to carry out duties under the Municipal Act, any other act, and other duties assigned by the municipality. And who's the decision-making body for the municipality? It's council. So what's staff there to do? Staff are there to carry out essentially the will of council. The will of council, not the will of the mayor, and not the directions, the wants or desires of any individual council members. Municipal staff are imperative to the functioning of the town. Okay, Justice Morocco just follows up exactly what was stated in Section 227. Okay. There are a number of statutory officers, and I want to highlight this. These officers derive their authority from statutes. They have an independent power to deal with specific matters, no matter what council would like them to do. Okay, I'll just explain a little bit. The clerk is the chief electoral officer under the Municipal Elections Act. He sets out certain rules and responsibilities and essentially administers the election. Council can't tell the clerk what to do in that role. It's specified. Council does have a certain role to pass certain bylaws and resolutions under the Municipal Elections Act. But for most things, the clerk runs the election. Okay? The treasurer cannot be told to run a deficit. A municipality cannot run a deficit, and you cannot instruct the treasurer to set out the annual reports in a certain way to show a deficit, because the treasurer has a statutory responsibility not to do so. Same with the auditor. Just think of how well the system would work if you could tell the integrity commissioner, don't bother with this complaint. It's okay. We like this council member. Don't investigate it. The integrity commissioner has an independent responsibility to report to council, but derives authority independently as set out in the Municipal Act and at law, and is not beholden to do everything that council tells him or her what to do. I won't talk about the fire chief, but I'll talk about the chief building official. This is one that's had a number of case law. Every municipality must appoint a chief building official as a principal authority under Section 3. The chief building official is given certain powers and responsibilities to do things as the chief building official is directed to do by statute. For instance, Section 8 says, of the Building Code Act says, no person shall construct or demolish land unless they have received a permit. Section 8.2 says, chief building official shall issue a permit if one of those 7 things, all of those 7 things that are captured in clauses A to G are met. Okay? Do they comply with the Building Code Act? Do they comply with applicable law? If they do, and they've paid their fees and they've done all the other things, they get entitled to a permit. Or chief building official has to refuse a permit. Chief building official cannot be directed by council to issue a permit or not issue a permit unless the statute says that the person can receive a permit or has to be refused the issuance of a permit. That is what a statutory officer is. There's one more. Interestingly enough, your chief administrative officer is not a mandatory officer. However, if council does appoint a chief administrative officer, that person, not council, is responsible for exercising general control and management of the affairs of the municipality for the purpose of ensuring efficient and effective operation of the municipality. Notice the difference here. The efficient and effective operation. The administration is under the CAO. If council has appointed a person, the CAO is the person who runs the municipality, not the council. Many members of council, when they're elected, believe that they were elected to run the municipality. They don't. You do not venture into the day-to-day management, operation, nor administration. That is the responsibility of the administrative arm of the municipality, the staff, right? The CAO is council's one employee, okay? You don't like the way things are running, it ultimately falls on the head of the CAO. Okay, but the CAO is the person who's responsible for the efficient and effective operation. Notice the difference between the head of council, who's responsible for the leadership of the council and responsible to run efficient and effective meetings. Because why? That's where the governance responsibilities come into play. That's where council makes its decisions. Right? The great paper released by CAMA last year, The Role and Significance of Chief Administrative Officer Position in Canadian Municipal Government. Really good read for those of you who would like to know more about your Chief Administrative Officer. I like this quote again, and I know I'm quoting heavily, but it's almost mandatory reading for anyone. Volume 1 of the Collingwood Judicial Inquiry. Members of council are trustees of the public interest. I've said that several times. Look at the sentence that I've highlighted. Members of council must also respect the need for a neutral and impartial public service. What I really deplore about the strong mayor authority is it gives a lot of vested authority to the mayor, who can hire and fire the chief administrative officer. Does the chief administrative officer all of a sudden become a neutral and impartial public servant? I think not anymore. I think in those municipalities, the chief administrative officer becomes basically the chief of staff to the head of council. So that's why I really, really think this legislation is badly thought out and will have dire consequences if it exists beyond this provincial government. Now, I'm going to bring all of these together in hopefully in a few minutes, and I'll give you some illustrations. It is council's role to make decisions on policies and to make rules to govern the municipality on matters within its jurisdiction by bylaw resolution. That's Section 5.1 of the Municipal Act. It is staff who carry out the policies. Again, who runs the municipality? The administrative arm, the operational arm, the management arm. Council does not do that. Council sets policies, implements programs. Staff carry that out. I like this quote from 3 academic sources. They are or were all profs at Brock University in their government courses. The prescriptive literature offers clear, if not always attainable, advice. Politicians must take a clear leadership role in policy setting and stay out of administration and management. Okay. George Cuff, a well-known speaker, author who always provokes the roles of council members and administration legally and practically are separate. The purpose of council is to govern, right? The role of the administration is to provide council with wise advice on what needs to be done, and then to carry out the wishes of council in an effective, efficient, and he adds, in a sensitive manner. Very interesting. So the two roles are not to be conflated. You don't expect your staff to pass bylaws. What you expect them to do is give you wise counsel, right? Recommendations, staff write reports. That's the role of staff, to give you wise counsel with an SEL, for you as council, CIL, to make those important decisions. But the administration runs by the municipal staff. Okay. Now, you have, I hope you do, I hope you have a council staff relation policy. If not, I'd be happy to provide you with one. It is so important that the two arms function together that the Municipal Act actually mandates that you have to have a policy that talks about council staff relations. That's how important it is. It basically sets out, this is the role of council, which should include many of the things that I've already talked about. And then it says, this is the role of staff, and includes a number of things that I talked about. And it typically says, and each stays in their own lane. So I'm going to talk to you about the Zamboni incident. The Zamboni incident is a really well-known illustration of the principle. You are at your local arena with perhaps your partner, your spouse, your family for a weekend. You're watching a hockey game, or you're watching an ice skating competition, and the ice needs to be cleaned. Okay, so you're watching it, and all of a sudden the Zamboni driver comes out, and you're watching it, and they're not cleaning nice sheets going around the ice as they're supposed to. They're zigzagging, crossing, crisscrossing all over the place. And you're looking at it, you're going, that's a damn terrible job that the Zamboni driver's doing. So what do? You're a member of council. You're looking at this. What do? Here's what you don't do. During the intermission or during the break in the skating competition, you don't go down to ice level, enter the equipment room, and elbow the Zamboni driver out of the way and start driving the Zamboni. That's taking over the operations of the municipality. Now, I used to laugh at that. Last term, we were the integrity commissioner for a municipality that's on an island. And one of the council members, I think you know where I'm going, had a traditional historic beef with the ferry system. Did not like anything about how the ferry system was operating. Well, one day, he's on the ferry waiting to leave the mainland to get to the island with a bunch of other people. It is a cold day. I think it was a February day, wanting to get across. And where's the ferry boat captain? Not there right now. What does the council member do? Yep, he leaves the mainland. He leaves port and starts taking the ferry across. There is risk of liability. There's endangerment of the well-being of persons, right? And that's something that you just don't do. It is wrong. So that's the illustration. And I mean, I've used many others. Council member goes to the local, again, community center and sees that a bookshelf has fallen down. He's handy. Does he start to fix the bookshelf himself? Does he bring in his own nails? No, he doesn't do that. That can create liability. He may not be doing it right. He may not be nailing the thing in the proper way. You have people who are retained to do that. Council members' responsibility in that case is you let your CAO know, or if you were at the arena that afternoon, you might want to let the person who is in charge of the arena that afternoon know that there may be a concern with the Zamboni driver. But you don't get on the Zamboni, you don't get on the ferry, and you don't start fixing the shelves in the community center. Okay? Now, the council staff relations are so important that not only do you have to have a policy under Section 270, but look at how you're supposed to deal with staff. The province dictates that there are 4 prescribed subject matters that have to be dealt with in a code of conduct. And one of them is respectful conduct. Now, if clause had ended right there, you would have said, probably, well, respectful conduct, that means conduct towards everybody. It does. It actually does. It means you have to be respectful towards each other, your fellow members of council, towards any resident, towards perhaps a person who's doing business with the municipality, towards other governmental officials that you may be dealing with, and importantly, with your staff. But the province actually put this in the regulation. Respectful conduct, including conduct towards officers and employees of the municipality or the local board. Why? Because one of the greatest sources of complaints that we get as integrity commissioners are that council's acting disrespectfully towards staff. They're telling them what to do. You, as an individual member of council, do not have the authority to do that. Council as a whole might have the authority to direct staff to do certain things, but not individually. You cannot go and demand that staff do certain things. And why? Why do you have that? Well, this case was went to court, and the decision was rendered in December of 2022, so it's just over a year old. The court said the relative power imbalance between staff who do not have a voice at council and elected members who do mean that their respective roles and responsibilities must be acknowledged and respected. What happened in this case? Councillor Villeneuve was an outspoken member of council. She felt that she could do and say anything that she wanted anytime that she felt it was appropriate. And what did she do? She sent the CAO a number of castigating emails that used, in the words of the Integrity Commissioner, very intemperate language. She was upset about a certain action that had happened, or in fact, inaction of the CAO. And at an open meeting of council, what she did is, Mr. CAO, why are you not telling us the truth? She basically called him a liar in an open public session in front of everybody, and she had the last word. The Integrity Commissioner found that this was a transgression, was a breach of the code of conduct. Why? Because there's a power imbalance between council and staff. He recommended a penalty. Council imposed the penalty. Councillor Villeneuve didn't stand for it and decided to go to court. This is the court decision. The Ontario Divisional Court looked at it and said, you have to respect those policies, the council staff relation policies and the requirements of the code of conduct that say you have to be respectful. You did not treat the CAO respectfully, and the reason being is because there's a power imbalance and you cannot say anything that you want anytime that you want. So please keep that in mind. That is one of the largest sources of complaints that we get, that individual members of council are usurping their authority and trying to exceed it and belittling, begrudging, acting despairingly, denigratingly towards staff. So that's a real problem. My takeaway from all of this is council is the governance arm and makes the large policy-based legislative, executive decisions. Council implement those decisions, but carry them out. The day-to-day management, the day-to-day operations, the day-to-day administration is carried out by the staff. Council does not weigh into that unless it's as council as a whole by setting policy and giving direction at the council level through bylaws, through resolutions, through orders, approvals, and through closed meeting directions to staff. Okay. Now, my last topic for tonight, and then I will break and I will let you ask me any questions that you would like, Mr. Mayor and members of council. Members who have dual or multiple roles. So this is for members who are members of council, but also may have other associations, other memberships, okay? Now, here's one. A member of council may be in a dual role by virtue of their office. So, Mayor Hens, you are in a dual role. You sit on two councils. You sit as the mayor on the local council of Dutton Dunwich, but you're also a county councillor on Elgin County Council. You have all of the mayors of the local councils and two deputy mayors of two councils that sit at county council. You have two hats, okay? You may, as a member of council, also be appointed by your own council to another body, such as an agency, a committee, a board, commissioner, tribunal. So, for instance, you may be appointed to the Committee of Adjustment, the Conservation Authority, a Property Standards Committee, the Library Board, and the Police Service Board. You may be appointed by your council to sit as a representative, as a director or a member of another body. Or you may be appointed as a director on a board of directors of a corporation of the municipality. For instance, a municipal service corporation created under Section 203 of the Municipal Act, or a local electricity distribution corporation created under Section 142 of the Electricity Act. Okay. Thirdly, you may be a member of another body in your personal capacity, not as an appointee of council. So you may be a member of a nonprofit organization, of a charitable foundation, of a community association, of a local service club, potentially of a place of worship. You attend those and you are a member of those in your personal capacity, not as an appointee of council. In this instance, you have to be very careful and mindful of your obligations to your council. If there's a financial interest of this other body, that you have to be wary of your indirect pecuniary interest obligations arising by Section 2 of the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act. Section 2 says that if you're a member of a corporation, if you're a director or senior officer of a public or a private corporation, you're a shareholder of a private corporation, or you're a member of another body, or you're an employee of the entity coming before council, or you are a partner of the entity coming before council, and any of those bodies have a financial interest in what's in front of council, you are attributed an indirect pecuniary interest, okay? You have to step away, okay? Now, I'm going to talk about to whom do you owe your duty of loyalty, your fiduciary obligation, okay? If you have a dual role. The rule is the primary obligation of the member is to act in the best interest of the body in which they are asked to make a decision, a ruling, or a determination. Okay? So, if you're a member of another body, let's say you've been appointed to the Conservation Authority, okay? When you're dealing with matters relating to the Conservation Authority at council, you're wearing your council hat. When you're dealing with matters dealing with the Conservation Authority, when you're at the Conservation Authority, you have to consider the best interest of the Conservation Authority. You are not allowed to fetter your fiduciary obligations when you're acting on behalf of another body to act only in accordance with what you believe your council wants, desires, wishes, or has actually maybe even purported to direct you. You cannot do that. That is a fettering of discretion. You owe a fiduciary duty to the entity at the time that you sit on the entity and are asked to make a decision. Okay, so let me go through this. in two-tier councils. So an ex officio member, like the mayor in this case, has an obligation to the upper tier to act in the best interest of the upper tier when he's the county councillor. Okay, so I'll give you an illustration of this. I was presentation in front of a lower tier municipality, and the mayor raised his hand. He said, "John, can I give you the example?" And I said, "Sure, Mr. Mayor, why don't you?" He says, so I said, this is a local council in a regional municipality. The mayor said, we have one bus route that runs through our town. It's imperative for people of our town to have this bus route that runs through. It runs from one end of town all the way to Yonge Street and makes connectivity. He says, so when it came time to make decisions about this bus route at the local municipality, I was unanimous, as were the other council, that we need to keep this bus route. He said, however, when I sat as a member of regional council and we looked at the use of this bus route and we were thinking about service levels, this bus route was on the chopping block to go. And he said, I had to vote in the best interests of the region. And we chopped that. And I said to him, Mr. Mayor, you probably got a lot of pats on the back for that. He said, absolutely not. It was quite the contrary. That's the risk that you take. In my view, I asked him, did you believe you made the correct decision? He said, I did when I was sitting at this local council to vote to try to keep this bus route. But when I was at the regional council, I think I made the right decision in the interests of the region. I said, well, that's right. That's how you have to apply. You have to apply it and put on the hat at the time that you sit on it. It's very difficult to do, but you can't go, Mr. Mayor, you can't go to the county and say, I can't vote in favor of this because my council has voted unanimously against this and I'm beholden to what they do. You're not beholden to your council. I understand you may feel an obligation, you may feel some loyalty, but your primary duty of loyalty belongs to the county when you sit on the county. It's very hard to do. So what happens if you've been appointed as a member of a local board or as a member of another body by council? The leading case is Walker versus City of Toronto. I'm just going to read you the quote because it's very important. The applicants believe that they are acting in the best interest of the Toronto Harbour Commission. The applicants in this case were City of Toronto council members who had been appointed to the Toronto Harbour Commission. They believe they are acting in the best interest of the commission. It would appear that Mayor June Rollins believes that the city-appointed commissioner should act in a way representing the interest of the city. If she believes that the three city-appointed commissioners are agents of the city, she is in error. The members must act in the best interest of the Toronto Harbour Commission, regardless of who appointed them, even if that interest is contrary to the wishes of those who appointed them. This principle applies. Now, I've given you one example, which is the best example that I could find that deals with a council appointee to a local board. This particular ruling has been applied more broadly to other bodies that are not just local boards. If they're committees or agents or tribunals, the same principles apply. Just because your council appointed you to it doesn't mean that you slavishly have to do what council wants you to do. That may be what you think is in the best interest of that particular body, but you cannot say that that's why you're making the decision. You have to apply an independent thought process, and you cannot fetter your discretion. A council appointee to a municipal corporation. Well, if it's a business corporation, it's covered by the Business Corporations Act. Every director or officer of a corporation, in exercising his or her powers and discharging his or her duties under the corporation, has a duty to act honestly and in good faith with a view to the best interests of the corporation. Those may not align with the best interests of your municipality. So here is a real life situation where this happens. Member of council's appointed to the local electricity distribution corporation. They have a closed meeting of that corporation. The member has been appointed, the member of council has been appointed on that committee. They go to a closed meeting and they hear certain information. Does that member have a duty or a responsibility to come back and tell her counsel what was told in the closed meeting of the corporation? The answer is absolutely not. She owes a fiduciary obligation, probably under the code of conduct of that particular body, not to disclose that information. While she is the council representative on that corporation, she can't come back and tell council what she heard. The same way thing works in reverse. She hears something in a closed meeting at council. She cannot run willy-nilly to her board at the municipal corporation and disclose what she learned in the closed meeting of council. The rule is what is said in a closed meeting stays in the closed meeting of the body of which you are a member of, okay? So the rule applies to upper and lower tier, to council appointees to other bodies, and to corporations. The last point I want to make, and I partially said this before, if you are a member of another body in your lay capacity, not as a member of council, you are a personal, private member of a body, a local service club, a community organization, community association, you have to be careful of the indirect pecuniary interest provisions under Section 2. You are saved if you're a council appointee to another body because there's a specific exemption under the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act. However, if you are a member of this body of your own personal doing, not as a member of council, being appointed by council, then a financial interest means that you have to recuse yourself and not participate in the decision making in any way. Even though the term body is not defined in the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act, it is to be given a broad interpretation to attempt to capture all possible conflicts of interest. So my conclusions, and I've come to the end of my presentation proper, Mr. Mayor, members of council. A municipal councillor is part of a collective body. The council is the decision-making body and authority for the municipality, save and except for strong mayor municipalities, which you are not a part of. You have to act in the public interest. You have to remember you have no individual, executive, or ministerial powers. And you yourself must comply with the resolutions, bylaws, rules, and policies that are put in place by council and at law. We had several of these last terms where certain members of council did not want to comply with policies that the municipality had put forward, talking basically about COVID or vaccination policies. If council deems it appropriate, you have to follow those. Imagine if you said, I didn't vote for that bylaw. That bylaw doesn't apply to me. That's not the law. That's not how it applies. So you can't decide, oh, I'm a member of council, so this policy doesn't apply to me. If council says it applies, it applies. When a council member has dual roles or multiple roles, you are bound to act with honesty and in the best interest of the body in which you are asked to make a decision or to advise. And finally, you must always consider your role and your status as an elected representative and the perception that the public has as a member of council. You know now, because I've told you, you have very limited independent responsibilities. The example that is brought up often is, can I provide a job reference for someone, a letter of recommendation, and sign it as council member? And my answer always is, if you know the person and your relationship with the person who's asked you for the job recommendation or the reference is through your work as a member of council, perhaps they were a former staff member at the municipality, of course you can. Otherwise, you cannot start writing on letterhead and using your counselor title for other matters like a job reference. Because why? You're trying to imbue it with the status of council as a member of council, and you can't do that. The perception's out there. The indoor management rule applies, but you shouldn't be doing that. That would be contrary to the code. So, Mr. Mayor, I've come to the end of the presentation. I will see if I can stop sharing now. I'm going to see if I can expand the and stop sharing. And then I'd be pleased, Mr. Mayor and members of council, to take any questions that you may have.
Okay, thank you, John, and I'll open up to council. Does anyone have any questions at this time? Councillor Greifeld.
Just, John, thank you for the presentation. I appreciate that, and it does clarify several things that have crossed my mind in my first term as a counselor. Just in reference to the committee, where our role in committees, and so we're obviously, some of us are appointed to specific committees within the municipality, such as recreation. We are no longer a part of it, but we're a part of the we had a councillor represented on the fire department and fire department association and so on. So specifically looking at committees such as recreation, what would be a simpler clarification of what a role would be on a councillor on a committee such as that?
Again, through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor, it would be the same thing. You would be acting as an advisory member, but you would still be in the governance realm. You're there. You have a responsibility to the committee. If the committee is a committee of council, then the committee is subject to the open meeting rule. So, for instance, if you were to go into a closed session, even though you've been appointed by your council to this committee, you're not allowed to disclose matters from that closed session because you receive that as a member of that particular committee. You have to discharge your obligations to that committee in the same way that you would to council, in the best interest of what the committee is seeking to do and whatever it is that the committee is seeking to advise council on that particular subject matter. I hope that helps. I can't think of another type of example that I can, or illustration that I can give you other than the confidentiality matter right now.
So I guess to broaden that just a little bit, would a counselor be involved in the committee, assist the committee in policy?
You would be making the decisions of the committee. It may be in the terms of reference that the committee itself drafts the policies, for instance. But it's very different from, if that's not what the requirement is, it's not the council or the committee members' responsibility to go away. It's for the committee, I think, to ask the staff to do certain things, not necessarily to draft it itself. Again, it depends on what the terms of reference may mean. For instance, Councillor, they may have, I'm going to try to think of a different example. Let's say it's a finance committee and you have someone who's an accountant on that committee. Perhaps the person would take maybe more of a lead role, but the person wouldn't be, I think, necessarily doing the hands-on drafting of the document and the policies, but it may be because maybe that's the function of the particular committee.
Anything else from council? I think you did a great job, John, and I can say from experience, community, we're pulled a lot of different directions. And the expectations are that call your local councilor, call your mayor, they'll fix the problem. So it's not an easy job. And I think we all have experienced that in the past year. I also want to mention it's a timely presentation. In my 9 years on council, I've never seen some difficult decisions that this council has right in front of them right now. And I just wrote down a quote, the decision for the long-term health and welfare of the community. And that kind of resonated with me because some of the decisions we have to make may not be popular, but I don't think anyone around this table is worried about the next election. So we can take that off. So if there's nothing further, thank you very much for the presentation. And I also will say that any council member, if they're torn between what's right and what's wrong, what should I do, you're always available for the Council of Dutton Dunwich.
Well, Mr. Mayor, I certainly will try to make myself available. That's one of the roles that we have as integrity commissioners. You are entitled, any member is, to reach out and ask us for advice on matters within our own jurisdiction, which is really the ethical advice. Admittedly, sometimes the ethical and the governance arms, they sort of crisscross a little bit. I always find that if I can help a member, I've had some 33 years in municipal government experience advising senior staff and council members on all sorts of things. I'd like to think that I can help you. So please don't hesitate. My only request is, Mr. Mayor, just to be really clear, is the Municipal Act says that if you do reach out to me, it's not, you're supposed to ask me the question in writing and I'm supposed to respond in writing. The reason being, so there's clarity and I'm not hit with, I need to know this. And then someone spills like 10 minutes of facts that are very complicated and I have to make a decision on the spot. So the Municipal Act actually says that a member requesting advice must do so in writing. And we as Integrity Commissioner are to respond in writing. Having said that, after I do that, I usually have it, and Mr. Mayor, maybe you've noticed this, because I know you've reached out for advice. I hope you don't mind my saying that. At the bottom of my advice, I usually say, if you would like to discuss this advice or you have any questions, let's set up a meeting, or please give me a call. I don't mind having a conversation, but I do have to insist upon the in writing requirement because that's a statutory requirement under the statute. And if you think about it, it's absolutely fair. If you are giving me a complex fact situation, you can't expect that I would glean everything all at once on a quick phone call and be able to give you advice just like that. So I usually like to get it, think about it. We have a sort of a 24, 48-hour rule. We try to respond to all requests in writing within 24 to 48 hours. Now, do we do it quicker? Yes, sometimes we do, because we know that you're under the gun and you just got it and you need the advice. We try to get back to you right away. And sometimes if it's very complicated, we might have to go away and research, and so we'll usually talk to you. But we usually try to get back to you within 24 to 48 hours. So I hope that's helpful.
It is for me, and I'm sure for the rest of council. So thank you for your presentation. Well received.
Mr. Mayor, members of council, thank you for asking me to do this. I very much appreciate it as your integrity commissioner. I can't tell you, many councils do not invite me. And in fact, some councils I've implored them and their senior staff don't seem interested. The council doesn't seem interested. It's really demoralizing. And I really do thank you for giving me this opportunity. I've talked to you for about an hour and a half. That's very kind, very patient of you. So I thank you very much. I'll take my leave now and wish you all the best.
Okay, thank you, John.
Thank you.
Let's take 5. I think everybody's been sitting here long enough, and I could use 5 minutes, if that's okay with council. And we'll still be on time for, I think we're good, yeah. Okay. Okay, just give me a second here.
Actually nice to see you guys in person.
Yeah, right.
It's not an AI thing at the other end.
No, that's real people.
Okay, everybody set? Welcome to Dutton Dunwich, and you're going to present the asset management plan, but I'm going to go around the table and let council introduce themselves, and then you can introduce yourselves. So
So we're Henry Greco. Deputy Mayor Ken Loveland.
Karen Kretschmer, clerk.
Mike Hentz, Mayor.
Corey Pembroke.
I'm Emily Snecknick. I'm a civil engineer. Haley Oxford, and I'm an engineering.
Okay. The floor is yours.
That's good. Perfect. Well, Mr. Mayor and councilors, thank you for having us here today to speak to you about the asset management plan update. We are excited to bring this 2023 update to you and give you a bit of a context on what we've been up to as part of this project, what our findings were, and a bit of context on asset management to help you kind of understand what all that good reading is inside the asset management plan. So what we'd like to do within this presentation is sort of set the stage about asset management a little bit, then dig into your actual data, and then what our sort of strategy and projections and the financial analysis findings from the asset management plan. And then we can have some time if there are any questions at the end of it. So to start off, we want to give you some context about what asset management is. It's a concept, it's kind of a buzzword. Sometimes we want to make sure that you understand why it's important and why it is being brought to council and why it's an important item for the province of Ontario to have these plans in place. Why do we use asset management? For investing wisely over the long term, for balancing operations, risks, and costs, for providing our community with the right service at the optimal cost, and keeping our community's future needs in mind. How does asset management deliver value to my community? So what it does is it looks at balancing the risk on assets with the performance of those assets with optimizing the costs. And through the optimization of these three considerations, we're going to get value from the assets. So asset management considers the full life cycle of the infrastructure, not just the initial cost, not just the disposal, but the whole cost through the entire life cycle of that being in service. And it's also a multidisciplinary thing. I think sometimes it sits with finance, sometimes it sits with the infrastructure group, but it does take everyone's hands to be able to implement it as a concept and as a way to think about managing the assets across the municipality. For asset management, there's 7 essential questions that can help us frame out and understand what asset management is and how we go through the process. The 7 essential questions starts with building your asset inventory. So the first question we look at is, what do you have and where is it? And this is a fundamental inventory question. How many roads do you have? How wide are they? How much water infrastructure do you have? Do you have a water tower? Do you have sidewalks? What is it worth? And this question is, what is the current value of those assets if you were to build them all today? And what is the replacement cost of each of those assets on an individual basis? And this helps you understand what you're looking at and what value you have in the assets within the municipality. The next question looks at the condition, and it asks what the condition of these assets are and what is the expected remaining useful life. And the condition can be determined theoretically just using the expected useful life and how old it is, or you can go boots on the ground and look at that road and provide a condition rating. So this can be gathered theoretically or actually. And next, we look at level of service, and we'll get into a bit more detail on what this means, but the level of service is what is the expectation of the customer, what is being provided by the municipality, and what do we need to do in that context. Finally, we look at the analysis and strategy development, and there's 3 questions that look at this. That is, when do you need to do it? And that looks at what work is outstanding on these assets, and when do you have to do that? What makes the most sense? Do you repave every 10 years? Do you replace a water main every 90 years? When does it have to happen? How much will it cost, and what is the acceptable level of risk? So do you let your water main go to 90 years, or at 70, do you say it's gone far enough, let's get it before it breaks? And the last one is how do you ensure long-term affordability? And that looks at considering the full life cycle of these assets. How do we implement each of these life cycles to make sure that throughout its entire life cycle, you can continue to afford to maintain it and to maintain that level of service that you're providing to your consumers? So the reason we're looking at this now and the reason why this has come to council in a couple different iterations is because the regulatory alignment. So Ontario Regulation 58817 is asset management for municipal infrastructure, and it was amended by OREG 19321. And it has 4 phases of compliance that are required for the municipality to meet for asset management. So phase 1 happened back in July 2019, and that was to have a finalized and adopted asset management policy. So we've checked that box. Phase 2, by July 2022, we had to have an approved asset management plan for core assets, and core assets are defined under the regulation, and that had to be approved by council. Phase 3, by this coming July, we need to have an approved asset management plan for all infrastructure assets of the municipality. And then phase 4 in July 2025, you have to have an approved asset management plan for all assets within the municipality that considers proposed levels of service and a funding strategy to get there. So as part of this, part of the asset management plan update that we did this year, we're going to meet phase 4 compliance because we have considered the proposed levels of service, and there is a section that discusses the funding requirements to get there. And so we're meeting phase 3, we're meeting phase 4, and we're doing an update to the core assets, which is why phase 2 is considered in progress, although that was met. So I'm going to pass it over to Emily now to give you a bit of context on the assets within your asset management plan.
Thank you, Kaylee. So Kaylee discussed earlier what do you have and where is it, and that's what we'll discuss here on this slide. So we have 8 asset categories within the municipality of Dutton Dunwich, and they are separated into core and non-core. So core is defined by the Ontario regulation, as Kaylee mentioned before, and your core assets are roads, bridges, and structural culverts, water, wastewater, stormwater, and then our non-core assets are building and facilities, fleet and equipment, and sidewalks. And these are the assets that your municipality owns and maintains and are what deliver service to your community. Now we're going to discuss the current replacement value. And these current replacement values, as Kaylee mentioned, are a 2023 cost replacement. So if we were going to replace all of the roads in Dutton Dunwich, this is what the cost would be. And that cost is a holistic full cost. So that's not just the layer of asphalt that goes on the top of the road and that material cost, but it's the full depth reconstruction of the road. So it's the sub base, the different layers of asphalt need to go on top. It's the construction, it's the engineering, it's the contingency. So we're really looking to have a holistic and full replacement value that incorporates all of the different aspects that contribute to this replacement costing. So I think small technical difficulty. I was just looking to make the announcement that our total estimate for the replacement cost for the town of Dutton Dunwich is $556.5 million. So that's what the total value of assets are in 2023 dollars. Now, what we try to do when we go through the asset management plan, we figure out what you have, where it is, and then we look at the condition of the assets. So in this case, we describe our assets in the condition assessment framework of 1 to 5, which is very good to very poor. Where very good is items that are basically like new, they're physically sound, they're in very good condition. And that ranges all the way down to very poor, where the asset is unusable, it's unreliable. And we've actually assigned each and every asset within your community a condition score. And this condition score contributes, and we use within the rest of the asset management plan to understand like the risk of that specific asset. And we use within the life cycle strategy to understand the life cycle and when we expect to replace it in the future. Now, this is a summary of the condition assessments that we have understood from the asset management plan. And each of these condition assessments have a different source for the condition ratings. So for example, for the roads, we're looking at 80% of your road assets being in very good or good condition, and about 40% being in poor or very poor condition. But these numbers come from a 2021 pavement condition index, and we have kind of adjusted those to reflect 2023 values. Next is the bridges and culverts. And we can see here that about 80% of your bridges and culverts are in good or very good condition. And these values for the condition come from a age-based deterioration model that we've run. Next is water, and I was astounded when I was running the model for this water network here. You're looking at 96% of your assets in very good condition. So, and that's an age-based model as well. Next is on to wastewater. We're looking at about 75% of assets being in very good or good condition, and that's also an age-based deterioration model. For buildings and facilities, we are looking at about 40% being in very good condition. And when we talk about buildings and facilities, we're looking at the individual components within those buildings. So I'm not saying that 4 of the 10 buildings are in good condition. 4 out of the 10 components within the whole building are in good condition. And that was a building condition assessment completed by Dylan last year in June or the summer, I believe, June or July. Next, we're going to move on to the fleet and equipment, and we're looking at about 80% of your fleet and equipment being in good or very good condition. And this condition score is from a rating provided by the municipal staff from the municipality of Dutton Dunwich. And finally, we're looking at the sidewalks, where we have about 90% in poor or very poor condition. But this is an age-based deterioration model, and this may not be completely accurate for the sidewalks, the present condition of them, but this is just because we ran an age-based model and the physical condition might be a bit better than what our model was telling us. And I think that is it on my end on the condition ratings, and I'll hand it back over to Kaylee.
Perfect, thank you. So we're going to move into level of service, which is a big component of what we've done as part of this asset management plan, and it's a big concept to understand and move forward with. So the level of service is the parameters or grouping of parameters that you use to be able to define the service that you're providing to your constituents, and that looks at social, political, environmental, and economic factors. So generally speaking, we can lump level of service into 2 categories, and that's the technical level service and the community level service. And the distinction between these 2 is the community level of service describes how the community is receiving that service, and the technical level of service looks at how that service is being provided by the municipality. And so we'll get into a bit more of what that looks like. Now, the levels of service parameters are defined within the Ontario Regulation 588-17 for the core assets. And so they have tables right inside that regulation that provide these parameters that you can respond to that are supposed to provide a fulsome picture of what that level of service is. So for the non-core assets, what we did as part of this project was worked through the non-core assets, developing those parameters in the spirit of 588-17 to be able to develop a picture that you can use to understand the service that's being provided and received for each of those asset categories. So on this next slide, to give it a bit more context, we have an example from the water assets. So just really high level, what you're looking at for level of service, the community level of service is what the community receives. So what they expect from your water service is they expect that every time they want to turn on the tap, they do, clean water comes out at a pressure that they want, at a temperature they're looking for. Well, that's their water heater, but we won't get into that. Then the technical side of things, we are looking at, is the distribution system big enough to get it to where we need to go? Is the treatment level hitting the adequate treatment standards that are mandated by the province? And so it's the same service being looked at from 2 different sides. And both of those concepts together give us the level of service understanding. So this one, what we've done is just cherry picked a couple of the items out of the regulation and your responses, just to give it a sample of how we've defined level of service. So for water under community, we look at the scope, and the scope asks about what is the extent of this, who is getting service. And so as part of the response, we've put a map in the asset management plan that shows the distribution system that's out there. And there's a number of properties that are being provided water service across the municipality. Reliability is a factor that they use to define level of service. And so what they've asked for is the number of boil water advisories. And so what we use is 2 years of data to come up with these level of service responses. And based on the water reports, the annual water reports, there were no documented boil water advisories for 21 and 22. So as the years go on, as the new reports come out, this will have to be updated to reflect the most recent 2 years of data. So from the technical side, we look at scope again, but it's phrased slightly differently in a way that the municipality would be more interested. The people, community want to know, does it go to my house? We want to know how many customers, where are they located? Where is it coming from? How big is the distribution system to get there? And from the technical side, we look at the reliability to say how many water main breaks were there. And so for this example, there was one in each of 2021 and 2022. So the next level of levels of service is, now that we've come up with these definitions and these parameters and we understand how we're defining it, we need to look at what it looks like in the future. And so proposed levels of service is your phase 4 compliance for July 2025. And it looks at setting a guide for the municipality to use to further future asset management. So this looks at setting a target, a proposed level of service target for 10 years. So in this case, the year is 2033. To understand what we're trying to get to. Where are we going with our levels of service? Where do we want to maintain, improve, decrease, depending on what you're actually looking at. So in general, levels of service can change over time, and that can be as a result of funding changes, community changes, or doing nothing, because as we know, the cost of everything continues to increase. So spending the same amount of money year after year as material and people costs increase will not allow us to get the same results. So generally speaking, for proposed levels of service, there's 3 scenarios that we can look at that will impact how funding levels will impact the levels of service in the future. So the first one is no change. So if we continue to budget the exact same amount, even though materials and people are getting more expensive, we'll find that our level of service will decrease because we can't purchase the same thing for the same price for the next 10 years. If we get an increase in funding, then we can, if we increase at the same amount that the prices tend to be increasing, then what we can typically find is we can maintain that level of service while increasing the amount that it's going to cost. If we do want to increase even greater over time, then we can increase the funding, and that will vary depending on what the funding injection is to be able to increase there. So all that to say, what we looked at was the current levels of service. And what we found was that the current levels of service are considered sufficient for what the customer is expecting and what the municipality is providing. So at this time, the proposed level of service targets is to maintain the current level of service. So with that understanding, we're likely going to have to consider an increase in funding to be able to maintain it at that level. Now, that said, that is the current projection, and asset management is a living concept and a living document. And so us saying this now doesn't lock you into anything. It doesn't mandate anything. That is our target. And you can continue to gather information from the community about what their expectations are, gather information from the municipality about how delivery is going, and make decisions on whether we want to dial up the level of service, dial down the level of service, or keep it the same. So this is a current target, but you can take it back and year over year, analyze how things are going and make changes to better reflect what the community expects and what the municipality is able to deliver. And just for a little bit of context, and there's a lot about proposed levels of service that I've gone over, but just to give a little bit of context on how you can change it. The level of service definition for roads, for example, looks at your gravel roads versus your hard roads. And so if you're changing a level of service, could be changing some of your paved roads into gravel roads, or changing some of your gravel roads into paved roads. So that could be representative of an increase or a decrease. You can look at changing the service of your fleet assets, perhaps removing some from service and contracting that work out, or going to an electrical fleet or something. So there's a lot of ways that you can dial up or dial down the level of service depending on what the expectations of the customers are. One of the examples that my coworker likes to give is the usage of a bridge. She had an example where a bridge was not in great condition, and so it was not adequate for the traffic that was going over it. So they changed the level of service for that bridge, stopped heavy trucks from using it, and turned it into a pedestrian-only bridge. And that fit the expectations of what the customers were looking for, and it allowed them to maintain use of that bridge without putting too much money into it to raise it to a standard that was no longer required for it. So there's a lot of opportunities, and that's something that you can take forward to understand what you're providing and where those opportunities lie for changing. The next concept we want to get into is risk. And so, as Emily alluded to earlier, we did a risk assessment for all the assets within the asset management plan. And this is to understand the likelihood and the consequence and the risk that's borne by each of these assets. So the risk formula that we use allows us to compare every asset altogether. And the findings, this is all the assets that we considered within the plan. And overall, the risk rating found that most of them, 95%, were in the low and only 5% were in the moderate. And we didn't find any assets that, based on our assumptions and information within the plan, were considered high risk at this time. So I'll just go into a little bit of detail about how we got here to give you a bit of information on it. So the two factors that we looked at were the likelihood and the consequence. And the likelihood of the failure and the consequence of the failure came together to determine what the risk was. So putting together the likelihood, we looked at the condition of the asset. What kind of shape is it in? How is it performing? And what is its resiliency to climate change? And based on these factors, we applied a number ranging from low to high for each of these factors. And those together gave us a likelihood score. The second component is the consequence. And we looked at what is the consequence of failure of that asset or non-delivery of that service. And the factors we looked at were the impact and the importance of that asset in delivering that service. Is it a major distribution line for the water system? Is it the main road in the community? What is the importance of that asset and the consequence of its failure? So again, on a sliding scale from low to high, we selected a number for each of the assets and came up with a consequence score. So overall, this is what that's not what it looked like. That's what it looks like. The likelihood by the consequence. And the intent of going through this is to help compare between the asset categories where your highest risk assets are, what your priorities are, so you know where to invest time and money to improve the condition and to minimize some of the factors that go into the risk calculation. And it helps to inform the asset management strategy. Which rolls us right into asset management strategies. So the next step in the asset management plan, now that we've set the inventory, we have the condition, we have the risk, we have the levels of service, we want to know how to roll that all together to understand how to manage the assets going forward, because that's really what's going to drive the asset management plan. So the asset management strategies are based on life cycle activities, and the life cycle activities are each of the individual activities that you can do within an asset's life cycle. And that's the initial construction, operation, maintenance works, renewal works, rehabilitation, replacement, disposal, and sometimes expansion activities. And so the strategy looks at how you use each of these individual activities to optimize the life of that asset and to optimize the funding that we're injecting into the maintenance of that asset. So within your plan for each of the asset categories, we have a section outlining what each of the life cycle activities are. And then we have a section that describes the strategy, which is how we implement these. And that strategy was determined through a strategy workshop with municipal staff to get some input on what is actually happening at the municipality, how we're achieving the asset management at this time, and what things that we would like to use in the future potentially to get the most out of these assets. So a bit about the strategy. The pie chart that we have on the top right here looks at both of these figures look at the life cycle of an asset, just to give it context about why these life cycle activities are important and the strategy is important. So the pie chart there looks at the expected costs of an asset throughout its life cycle. So we can see that the original engineering design portion of that asset is a small sliver of it. And then we look at the cost to construct it. And that's still only a small piece because the remainder of that pie is your operations and maintenance cost. So even though an asset costs a certain amount and we approve that cost to construct it, we have to understand that throughout the next how many years of that life cycle, that asset's life cycle, we have to continue to add funding to it to be able to keep it useful and providing the right service to the community. So that's where the operations and maintenance, that is a very simplistic way to label it, but that does look at things like your operations and maintenance, your renewal, your rehabilitation, and implementation of these sort of like midpoint life cycle activities. The bottom graph is implementation of these activities over the life cycle of the asset. And so what we're showing here, the black curved line, is a typical deterioration curve of an asset where it's at perfect condition at the top, and then it deteriorates in a nonlinear fashion down to failure. And what we're showing is the rehabilitation zone between the green and the red. This is where your asset has deteriorated, and above that green line, it's still working just fine. It's, you know, it might not be perfect anymore, but it's doing what it has to do. Once we hit this green line within that zone, we're starting to get to a point where it's maybe not providing the service the way you want it to, but we're in a great area where that doesn't need replacing yet. We have an opportunity to do some of these other life cycle activities, like for example, a sewer, if it's starting to deteriorate, but it's overall still within that range, you can put a liner on it and extend the useful life. So if you go do a relining, then it pops it back up into that good condition zone, and you get to extend the useful life of that asset by a number of years. It'll sort of sawtooth back up off of that deterioration curve. Once you get to a certain threshold, that red line, that's your reconstruction zone. And that's where the asset has deteriorated to a point where it's no longer a candidate for these rehabilitation works because the condition is too poor. And in that zone, you now have to consider replacing or reconstructing that asset. So what we want to do is ideally not follow this black line. We ideally want to be able to pop it back up here and there to be able to get the most life out of that asset by choosing when to do these life cycle activities at opportune times throughout the life cycle of that asset. And that is reflected in the strategy of how we go through implementation of the life cycle activities. So what we did for the strategies, once these were defined, we defined the life cycle activities, discussed the life cycle strategies with a municipal team. We generated 10-year forecasts for what works would be required for each of the asset categories based on the strategy that's determined. And so there is a section within your asset management plan for each of them that looks at what works are upcoming. They have graphics showing the funding requirements across the 10 years of the asset management plan, and that's all based on these strategies and life cycle activities. Following the projection of the strategies, we looked at the financing strategy, because the final piece for the compliance is understanding what level of service you're providing, where you want to be, and then the funding that's associated with that. And so I just want to highlight at this point, the asset management, the purpose of it is not to give you capital plans. It's to give you general funding requirements and understanding of what it's going to cost. So we're not trying to tell you within this plan that you must do this project then, this project then. It's a guide to tell you, generally speaking, you know, you're not investing enough money at this point to be able to maintain this. So your next step is to go and find out how you address that funding gap. So it's although it does look at individual assets, the intent isn't to necessarily give you a play-by-play of what next steps are. It's to give you the concepts of it. So the financial strategy is the last step of it, where we looked at the strategies, we looked at the projections, and now we want to understand where that leaves us in 10 years. So what we looked at was the incoming funding sources. So we looked at government funding and grants and debentures. And we looked at the capital expenditures. So we considered two scenarios. And the first scenario was the unlimited scenario. And so this looks at if funding was no burden at all, you had unlimited funds to work with, what would the projections require? What do the assets need if funding was not a consideration? The second one is the one that is limited to maintain the existing level of service. And so throughout the modeling, we capped it to say, you know, if this is your level of service, what is it going to cost to be in the same position in 10 years? So there is a limit to that funding. So we had the funding sources incoming, the capital expenditures based on these two scenarios, and we evaluated that against the municipality's 2022 debt repayment limit of just over $1.7 million, just to see, based on what your system is right now, where are we going to land? And just to note, we kept it all in 2023 dollars because inflation is all over the place. Everything is sort of apples to apples here. So forward looking may need some consideration of that. So this is sort of the results on a high level of what the financial strategy showed. So on the graphic here, we're showing the unlimited scenario in the reddy orange, the maintain level of service in the blue, and then the debt repayment as the black line. So if funding was no concern, we had unlimited funds, the annual investment would start in the $2 million range. And this is average costs. So using the unlimited scenario, we're sitting higher than the municipality's current debt repayment limit. So already, if we were to use that scenario, there's not enough debt repayment to allow us to spend that kind of money. On the maintain existing level of service scenario, we are starting below that debt repayment threshold, and it takes us up until 2028, 2029 to be able to reach that. So if we continue spending on the maintain level of service, that gives us a few years where we are within our reach before it starts to get beyond our means in 28, 29. This can be refined. There are opportunities for the municipality to consider other sources of funding if there's other grants, other subsidies, tax levies, user fees that can contribute to this as incoming funding that can reduce the requirement for that debt repayment limit or reduce what we're going to be applying against that. So the next portion on financial strategy, and this is just sort of like a kind of just an earmark to know where you're at, is we like to look at reinvestment rates. And the reinvestment rate is the annual expenditure compared to the total value of the assets. So you can see, generally speaking, what percentage of the value are you reinvesting into it, into its life cycle. So with the unlimited scenario, $7.9 million represents about 1.82% of your total value. And for the maintain level of service scenario, we're at 4.2 million, and that represents just under 1% of your total value. The 2016 Canadian Infrastructure Report Card, it provides a range of reinvestment rates that it recommends, generally speaking, across different types of assets. And that range overall is between 1 and 3 for the most part. So with that in mind, your unlimited scenario at this $8 million a year, that's sort of within the infrastructure report card range. Maintaining level of service is just slightly below. And the reason we bring that to the table is just as a consideration that a good practice would be to be within that range, to know that you're investing that percentage of the value back into it to be able to maintain it. And if we're striking slightly below that, then we might not be in a position where we're maintaining the assets where we want to be. So we're very close. It's not wildly out of the park, but that's just a good indicator of where you think you might be or where you want to be. There's also opportunities if there is something like the assets that you have right now, something like the water is all in very good condition. And it's all in very good condition at the same time, which means that it's probably all going to find itself in very poor condition at the same time. And so the lifespan of those assets is pretty big. So you have a bit of time to work with. But when they do come due, you're gonna need a fair amount of funding to be able to look at that. So there's opportunities at this point. If your expenditure is fairly low, you can be looking at doing things like contributing to reserves to be able to build up a nest egg for when all your water lines break at the same time and you need to inject $100 million into that. So as an example. Yeah.
The 0.97, what the reinvestment rate of what value? What's that? Where does that value come from?
So the reinvestment rate, so this is it's about 1% of your total asset value
So
across.
that's 500,
Yes.
555
Yeah.
million or whatever it is.
Yeah.
That's the reinvestment rate.
Yeah.
Of that value.
Yes, yes. And so this is a really simplified version because we've looked at the assets all across. This is one whole number. You can look at it on an asset by asset basis to understand a bit better. And there is some language about that in some of the asset categories.
Technically, our average annual capital expenditures, you're saying should be 4.2 million. Is that what you're saying on that chart?
We're saying that the 4.2 puts you slightly less than the recommendations of the 2016 infrastructure report card.
Okay.
So if that's enough right now to maintain your assets where you want to be, then it could be enough. But it's just as sort of a gauge to tell where you're at relative to the recommendations of that infrastructure report card. If that's okay. Good. Okay, so the last thing we wanted to discuss here was what next steps are. So here's where we find ourselves. You have a draft plan in front of you. We're looking at hitting those compliance targets. Where do we go now? So the first thing we need to consider is the regulatory compliance. There's an annual report that goes to council for asset management, and that's going to have to happen annually, obviously. By July 24, we need to have an approved AMP covering all the assets, and That's what this is, excluding natural assets. So that is something that the municipality does need to consider to be able to hit that compliance. By July 2025, you need to have the proposed level of service, including 10-year life cycle management and financial strategy. So we're, with this asset management plan, we're there, again, excluding the natural assets. And then there's a requirement to have a full update to the AMP every 5 years. And so within this regulatory compliance, there's an annual report and there's a full update every 5 years. So the 10-year projection that we have, 5 years into that projection, you're going to do this all again, review it and find out where you are. So this is not, again, reiterating that this is not a once and done. This is a living document that you're going to hear about year after year, and you're going to have opportunities to have input on what things look like your projected levels of service, your funding requirements, and it's going to be a living document that you can have an opportunity to contribute to help the municipality move forward. There's a couple other recommendations that we have included within this AMP to help better characterize your inventory or provide a better picture of the assets within the municipality. And the first one is with condition assessments. So like Emily mentioned, some of them are done theoretically by age. And so you might find that there's, better assumptions that can be put in there to get better, more reflective age-based projections. There's also opportunities to do actual physical condition assessment of some of the assets. And I know there's stormwater cammering going on right now. So you are actually in the process of getting better condition assessment information for the stormwater, which can be incorporated into asset management planning in the future. The next one is performance data. And this is an expansion on the level of service, and it's indicators that you want to track to be able to understand how the assets are performing. So similar, but not the same as levels of service. And there's an opportunity to go back and determine what performance metrics you are interested in tracking that give you a good picture of the assets and to track those on an annual basis. And the financial strategy, we can look at reducing reliance on debt, looking at other incoming funding sources like subsidies, grants, tax levies, increases, etc. And that concludes our prepared slides. So, Mr. Mayor and Council, we're happy to take questions if you have some.
Anything from council? They're afraid to ask. I do have a question, and we just received this more thorough. But does this thing drill down to, for example, this particular building that we own has a bad roof, or the other building has a bad foundation or something? Is it that detailed?
Yes, with an asterisk. We, as part of this assignment, we undertook a building condition assessment in which, so typical asset management takes existing condition information and reports it back. So if you had that information, we could incorporate it. We don't typically go into the projection levels of having that. It's sort of rolled up sort of as an annual, here's the funding requirement. But as part of this assignment, we did do a detailed look where some of the team went out on the ground and surveyed each of the buildings and got that detailed information. So as part of this work, you do have that information, but that is typically a level of detail that is more detailed than we typically report in the asset management plan.
So if I could follow up, then if we look at the assets we own and the recommended funding per year, then it'd be up to staff to direct that to the priority areas of buildings, priority areas of roads, of sidewalks.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. Thank you. Anything? Yeah.
I think
Council has been given homework.
I think the value here is you end up with if I'm understanding this correctly, you end up with a projected value of allocated funds per year is what we're going to end up with, correct? Like,
Yeah.
So we have capital expenditures that we can rely on just through this asset management plan that we can build on each year. So I think that's the greatest value in this.
And that's where the asset management software will come in.
Right.
Because we could take this and populate it with our data and enter the levels of service and build it out. And then when you're using the work order system, the management system, it's deciding whether you just it's tracking, like sometimes you might say a truck's gonna last 15 years, but I always call it a Friday truck. If you're putting too much into it, then it's not gonna last. So it tracks this stuff and it builds it out onto where you should be replacing it and when, and what you should be putting in. I mean, we'll never put in what they're saying we should put in every year, but I mean, it gives council an idea of, how far you are behind really in your assets, so.
This would help a great deal in long-term, multi-year projections, multi-year budgeting, which I think is important that we need to get there. It will
Yes.
help.
Yeah, and I think that's in what I've seen in my asset management experience is that it tends to be the needs on the assets tend to be higher than the capabilities of the municipality. And so it puts it at a higher, not as granular as seeing a capital plan for the next 1 or 2 years, but at a higher level, you have projections out a longer term to understand, if we keep going at the pace we're going, here's what we're looking at, and here's where our shortfalls are or our excesses. So it gives you an opportunity to kind of revisit in a forward-looking way. Instead of being so reactive, you can be a bit proactive and think like, if we can't afford this in 10 years, what are our opportunities? Where can we change level of service? What can we do differently to be able to maximize these assets? So that's partly why I love asset management, is because it's forward-looking, and so many things we do are reactive that it's nice to have something that we can start to plan for the future and understand how our daily operations and how we're doing things on a daily basis across the whole municipality impact what we're able to afford in the future.
Anything further from council or staff? Thank you for the report, and thank you we went from way behind to ahead of the curve, or we will be by July.
Yeah, these girls know I became an engineer overnight.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, so much relies on this future funding, and I think that's going to be enforced. So I appreciate your work, Tracy, for getting us here, and your work for bringing this forward to us. We're caught up, or we're going to be there. So thank you.
Just one question before you leave. The natural assets, it's just any trees on a municipal land, right? Is it anything else besides trees?
Yes.
Pond? Like, do we have to, like, is it gonna be like stormwater ponds and?
Stormwater ponds are
already included, sorry.
Yeah, those are going to be
Yeah.
stormwater
Yeah,
assets.
yeah.
So it's sort of an evolving concept, this natural assets, and I think a lot of municipalities are sort of learning it at the same time. So I don't have all the answers for you today, but we can definitely look into that and get back to you on it. I think some of the ideas are if you have like flower beds, trees, naturalized areas, and understanding what you have of that, and then doing things like applying values to them where it's not a tangible asset necessarily, but what's
Yeah. Yeah.
yes, exactly. So it's an evolving world, and we'd be happy to get you the information that we have. I don't have that all
I'm
right
thinking
now.
it's a great road trip for the public school. We'll send them out and count trees. And, they can identify them, whether there's a maple tree. There's a.
Yeah. The environment.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you for having
Thank you very
us.
much.
How long a drive do you have?
I'm heading back to London, so 45.
Okay.
I'm about to say-
Okay. All right. Safe trip. Hopefully it's not too foggy out there for you.
You know what?
It's bad, it's not expected.
Okay.
It was right there. Thank you. Thanks to meet you all.
I am told that we could take a break right now. There is something in the kitchen for us, so probably an opportune time to do that. With council's approval. Okay.
You yell, I'll pick.
Number 7 on the agenda is the Drainage Department, and we have a request for drain improvement, the David Carroll Drain, number 3, from Good Use. Any comments or questions on that? Clerk Tara, please.
Moved by Pemberton, seconded by Drewlark, that the council of the municipality of Dutton Dunwich decides to proceed with the David Carroll Drain 3 improvement request under section 78 of the Drainage Act received from James Goodhue, and instructs the clerk to notify Lower Thames Valley Conservation Authority as required under section 78(2) of the Drainage Act, and that an engineer be appointed under the appropriate section of the Drainage Act after the 30-day time period from the notice of council's decision was sent to the Lower Thames Valley Conservation Authority and OMAFRA has passed. All in favor? And that's carried.
Thank you. And B, the quote results for the Brown Drain work on the open ditch in the village. The report is in front of council. Are there any comments or questions? The only comment I have is Timmermans is already at work. And my understanding is visited every homeowner or landowner, so hopefully it stays frozen this winter and they'll be less intrusive. So I'm glad to see the results of this tender.
That's quick.
Yeah,
That's awesome.
and the others have a late starting date, and Timmermans are going on it right away, so that's a good thing. Clerk Tara, please.
Moved by Drewlark, seconded by Dreyfus, that the council of the municipality of Dutton Dunwich receives the report of the drainage superintendent titled quote results, Brown Drain, work on open ditch in village, dated January 24th, 2024, for information, and that council award Timmermans Drainage and Excavating Incorporated the contract for the work required on the open ditch portion of the Brown Drain in the village of Dutton in the amount of $47,600 plus HST, and further that council instructs the mayor and clerk to sign the contract and forward a copy to the contractor. All in favor? And that's carried.
Thank you. Number 8 is correspondence. The first one is Dutton Dunwich West Elgin Community Fund, the 2023 annual summary. Does council wish to?
I'll speak to that.
Councilor Dreyfus.
I'm on this committee, so we actually had a meeting today, so I just want to share with the council, other than the report, that we're having a new intake for community funding from May 1st to June the 14th. So we've earmarked a few organizations already in Dutton Dunwich, or I have, that I'm going to approach to look for funding. To date, I'm just going to give you an update of where we are with a fundable balance. So we're a little over $260,000 in the fund, which this year the spendable contributions to the community will be between $7,000 and $8,000. So it's a great way for small organizations to participate. So I guess I'm encouraging, if you know of anybody in the municipality that, is not for profit, that needs some help for even small projects, this is the fund to come to. And if they're not a legal entity, they just got to go through the municipality, and we can sign the documents that we're supporting them. So that's pretty much it. So
Thank you for that. Yeah, good work. This.
Committee's doing a great job, and there's a few people that are really working hard at it. So it's going to continue to grow. The cool thing this year is we've had some surprise donations of up to $50,000. So there is a heart for it. It's going to continue to grow going forward. So.
Anything further from council? Well, Clerk Tara, please.
Moved by Dreyfus, seconded by Pemberton, that correspondence item 8A from the Dutton Dunwich West Elgin Community Fund be received and filed. All in favor? And that's carried.
Thank you. Item B, the town of Mono declaration of road safety emergency. Any comments from council on that one? do we want to support that? I hear no comments from it. One thing caught my attention here and I was took a back in my seat when it was signed by Fred Simpson. And just happened that we just lost Fred Simpson. Recently he passed away, and of course he's Ken's neighbor. So anyway, just I guess there's another name somewhere in the world. Clerk Tara, please.
Moved by Pemberton, seconded by Drouillard, that the Council of the Municipality of Dutton Dunwich supports the resolution from the town of Mono declaring a road safety emergency, and that they call on the other municipalities and the province of Ontario to recognize a road safety emergency and take the following actions. 1, launch a province-wide road safety educational program to be funded from a portion of the monies currently spent by the Ontario Lottery and Gaming Corporation to advertise games of chance and lotteries in Ontario. 2, review and increase all HTA fines and penalties to reflect a deterrent amount and consequence that sends a message that driving is a privilege subject to conditions. 3, permit municipalities to deploy ASE in 80 km/h zones or less without having to declare community safety zones and without onerous conditions. 4, establish a working group with municipalities to identify and recommend elimination of regulatory red tape associated with the use of ASE and AMPs. 5, develop mechanisms that ensure POA fines and penalties do not lose their deterrent effect over time. 6, work with municipalities to create better means of collecting outstanding POA fines and victim surcharge monies estimated to exceed 1 billion as far back as 2011. And that a copy of this resolution be forwarded to Rob Flack, MPP, Karen Vecchio, MP, and the town of Mono. All in favor? And that's carried.
Thank you. Item C is Paul Daniel with the Dutton Cruise in. Any comments from council on that? I see none. Clerk Tara, when you're ready.
Moved by Drouillard, seconded by Loveland, that the Council of the Municipality of Dutton Dunwich supports the Dutton Cruise-In Events road closure on Curry Road from Shackleton Street to Mary Street from 5 p.m. to 8 p.m. on May 29th, June 26th, July 31st, August 28th, and September 25th, 2024, and that council approves the use of the municipal office washrooms during the events, and that a copy of this resolution be forwarded to the County of Elgin and requester Paul Daniels. All in favor? And that's carried.
Thank you. Item D, the Municipality of Tweed license plate renewal fees. And I just must say, this was an intriguing idea to me. So any other comments from council? I really thought it was a mistake when this government came out with this idea. So maybe this is a way to claw some money back for us. But anyway, Clerk Tara, go ahead, please.
Moved by Loveland, seconded by Dreyfus, that the Council of the Municipality of Dutton Dunwich supports the resolution from the Municipality of Tweed requesting that the license plate renewal system be reinstated to allocate the 6 billion lost infrastructure dollars to address the critical infrastructure needs municipalities currently face, and that a copy of this resolution be forwarded to Rob Flack, MPP, Karen Vecchio, MP, and the Municipality of Tweed. All in favor? And that's carried. Moved by Dreyfus, seconded by Drouillard, that relevant correspondence was reviewed. All in favor? And that's carried.
Thank you. And our consent agenda, we have 1, 2, 3, 4 items on there. Does council, pardon?
Well, Mary Hans, I declared previously declared a conflict on item 2, so
Sorry.
I
Okay,
think
we'll do them
Clerk Crutcher's
independently.
she's
Okay,
gonna work her magic.
we'll deal with item 1. Does council wish to speak to the Elgin County Economic Development January 2024 newsletter? No comments on that. Can we do three and then with one resolution? Deal with the other one separately.
So I could do two resolutions, one for the one item and then one for all the other items.
Okay, we'll go right to number three then. And it is a letter from one family regarding the community center. I think everyone received that in their package. Council, have any comments on that?
I'm just make a comment that maybe we should defer some of the comments to the recreation for recommendation and how we can deal with this. So I think it should be dealt with somehow or another, but and reviewed by the rec committee. So
Councilor Pemberton.
Yeah, and I read this and I feel for the family, but the municipality is a business. And if we're closed at 4:30 on Friday, there's not many businesses out there that are they're there over the weekends and stuff like that to book for the following week. So I don't feel that we've done anything wrong here. Or if people aren't able to get a hold of us after 4:30 on a Friday, I I do feel, and you know, in that time of their need, they were really looking for something, and I can understand and appreciate that. But I don't think having somebody on call all weekend for bookings is the right answer either. And any other municipality that I've been involved with, yeah, there's on-call phones, but not for bookings. So I feel for them, but I don't think that's the right avenue to go down.
Anything further? Tara, I'd like you to comment on this. I know you've been working with Sue Vandendries on coming up with a policy or to look after emergency situations. So go ahead, please.
So I have spoken with Sue Vandendries specifically, and we are looking at all of our cemetery procedures and policies and how we're going to handle some of these, because we do have some people now that have notified Sue that because of their religion, they need to be buried within 24 hours of death. So we do have some extenuating circumstances that we will make sure that whether it's me on call, because I'm already on call kind of for emergency management, for those situations. In this situation, it was for an event on a Wednesday. So there is still some time there. I understand that they had family coming from out of town, but we do have to make sure that there's no preferential treatment to anybody in the municipality. And that if it was anyone, like someone that had just moved here from Toronto a week ago and they needed a facility because their family member had died, we have to make sure that we treat them the same that we're treating anybody else within the municipality. So we just need to get those procedures in place, and we're working on them, and then we'll bring them to council's attention so that we're making sure we treat everyone fairly.
Okay. I'm just going to comment. At no time through this whole process, the Lund family did not contact me on this one. So take that for what it's worth. It wasn't, it was a family friend. Anyway, Tara's on this one. And let's go to the item four, Lower Thames Valley Conservation Authority, the preliminary budget. Councillor or Deputy.
I'll just make a quick comment. I think our general meeting is February the 14th, I think, and that's when we'll be approving that budget. Hopefully from the Conservation Authority, it's a bare bones budget, and they kept it down as close as they as to zero as they could, but it's pretty difficult with lack of grants and stuff they're getting. So and I guess my recommendation is that we support that. So.
Anything further from council I know they do have sharp pencils down there. Clerk Terry, we have a resolution for the three.
So our first resolution moved by Pemberton, seconded by Dreyfus, that consent agenda item 9A2 is approved. All in favor? And that's carried. And then Counselor Drewler can vote on this one. Moved by Loveland, seconded by Pemberton, that the items on the consent agenda be approved. All in favor? And that's carried.
Thanks for your math.
So we got to go back to number 2.
No, it's all done.
Okay. Nobody wanted to talk to that one anyway. Okay, we have other staff reports and the Water Department Annual Summary Report 2023. Anyone wish to speak to that or comment on it? I see nothing. Clerk Tara, please.
Moved by Pemberton, seconded by Loveland, that the Council of the Municipality of Dutton Dunwich receives the report of the Water Operations Manager titled Annual Summary Report 2023, dated January 24th, 2024 for information, and that Section 22 of OREG 17003 requires distribution of the summary report, and further that the Council of the Municipality of Dutton Dunwich confirms that it receives the 2023 Annual Compliance Summary Report at the January 24th, 2024 council meeting. All in favor? And that's carried.
Thank you. And item B is the Heritage Committee Annual Report. Councillor Dreyfus, do you wish to add to that?
No, the only, the report's pretty self-explanatory. The only thing I'll add is that Lawrence Grant has retired from the committee, so we're a committee member short right now, so we'll see what we can do with that. So
He will be hard to replace.
he's a very difficult one to replace. Yeah. So.
Okay. Clerk Tara, please.
Moved by Loveland, seconded by Dreyfus, that the Council of the Municipality of Dutton Dunwich receives the report of the Executive Assistant titled Dutton Dunwich Cultural Heritage Committee Annual Activity Report 2023, dated January 24th, 2024 for information, and that Council of the Municipality of Dutton Dunwich receives the Dutton Dunwich Cultural Heritage Committee Annual Activity Report 2023. All in favor? And that's carried.
Okay.
Yeah.
Item 11, any unfinished business from anyone? I see nothing. Any new business? Nothing new? Okay. Did you have something?
Announcement.
Okay. You're up. Announcements. Councillor
Okay.
Goulart.
Just gonna briefly just go through this. The Terrace Lodge Comforts of Home Fundraising Redevelopment Committee are on our final push. We're just over 73. We might even be a little higher than that, 73% of our fundraising goal. And so we partnered with the Kinsman Club of Elmer to put on a gala event. So I'd like to invite anyone if they would like to purchase tickets. I have them. Yes, it's a gala event. It's a fancy dress event. And just to say, there's a number of ways like council, businesses, community can help them out. You could purchase tickets and attend the event. You could sponsor the event with a monetary sponsor or donate live or silent auction items, as well as you can always donate to the Terrace Lodge Comforts of Home campaign. So that's my announcement. Thanks for listening.
Thank you. They're doing great work down there.
Just consider it an announcement. Consider it
Just
Just wanted to update council on that housing enabling water system fund that was announced when we were at Roma. Kind of got more of a breakdown on this. I don't believe our wastewater treatment plant will fall under this, just because timing. But I will be applying for the Shackleton line water main. I believe we can get that under. Just,
Is that the 200 million they were floating around?
yeah. So just let you know that the problem is that project must be in the process of or completed design and planning. So we haven't started design on the wastewater treatment plant, so it won't fit, but we can certainly, I think, get the Shackleton line water main in. So just to let you know.
Is it because of the design we can't, we're not
We're
there
not
yet?
far enough along with the wastewater treatment, unfortunately. I mean, I'll do some more digging, but I don't think we are. We don't have any design. We've got concept design just for the EA, but we're not that far, so.
That was a pretty short window too, wasn't it?
Well, we have till April, but I don't,
Oh.
we won't have the EA done. Unfortunately.
Okay. Any other announcements? There was another $400 million program that was floated, I believe, at Roma. We haven't got the details on that yet. Okay, thank you. Any other announcements? Don't see any. Item 14 is a proposed bylaw, 2024-03 interim tax levy bylaw. Dr. Tara, that's pretty self-explanatory.
Moved by Dreyfus, seconded by Drulard, that bylaw 2024-03, being a bylaw to levy interim taxes for 2024, be read a first, second, and third time and passed. All in favor? And that's carried.
Which brings us to closed session. So, Clerk Tara, do you want to get us there?
Moved by Drulard, seconded by Pemberton, that the council for the municipality of Dutton Dunwich now moves into a session of the meeting that shall be closed to the public at 7:50 PM in accordance with section 2392 of the Municipal Act, SO 2001, chapter 25, for discussion of the following matters. Labor relations or employee negotiations, section 2392D of the Municipal Act for the Medical Center. All in favor? And that's carried.
Let us know when you're ready.
All right. Moved by Loveland, seconded by Dreyfus, that bylaw 2024-04, being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of the municipal council of the municipality of Dutton Dunwich, be read a first, second, and third time and passed. All in favor? And that's carried.
Okay. And the next meetings are there in front of you. Anything further? Clerk Tara, please.
In front of you. We all died.
Moved by Dreyfus, seconded by Pemberton, that the meeting of the council of the municipality of Dutton Dunwich closes at 8:43 PM. All in favor? And that's carried.
Yeah.